Oh, guess what? We're surrounded by police. Can't get away from them.
Oh, you seen police?
No, it's the hikers them. Oh, they're calling us.
Been walking a lot, expeditions and stuff like that. So if you've got any issues and things, just chat. Find it difficult and things, just say we'll have a nice time. I also do wellbeing walks every week for Redbridge. And I'm also a trainer for the Ramblers Association for wellbeing walks. So reasonably experienced coming out. I've also been to Everest Base Camp, but it's not like that today.
It's called, we'll end up in a place called High Beach, and it's B-E-A-C-H after beaches like somebody's here from, come up from Brighton, it's coming from Brighton anyway. So, because all the stones around it, because it is all the beach that was left as the glacier melted. So this is High Beach, and the trees have come back in. And you'll see as we go up, we'll be walking up the ridge, which is kind of the sandbank, the gravel bank that was left at the end of the Ice Age. And the wonderful thing about it is that the forest is really how it is because of the symbiotic relationship between people and trees. And we'll talk a bit about the trees a bit later on, because the trees here look very different to trees you'll see elsewhere in London and around the country, and we'll talk about why that is. If you look up here, one bit of quick history about the forest. Can you see a kind of white building with a narrow roof just on the top of the hill over there?
Yeah.
That's Queen Elizabeth I's hunting lodge, built for her in 1543 by Henry VIII. And when he built it for her, there wasn't a roof on it because it was a hunting lodge. So they used to have all the deer in the forest herded down to this plain. And they, the royals, would be at their ease on the top of the hunting lodge with their bows and their arrows, and making very easy hunting for them with the deer that were herded towards them. They weren't really hunting. So that's how it was for royalty back then, even back then. But some of the trees that we'll see today were here in those days, in 54. There were trees here that were over 1,000 years old, so those trees will have experienced that kind of royalty walking through back in Henry VIII's days, which always makes me just kind of stop a minute. Wow, these trees are... Oak, which we'll talk about a bit later, beech, which we'll see a bit further on, and this is a hornbeam tree. It's a very young hornbeam, and one of the distinctive things about hornbeam is it looks as though a kind of child had put their hand in paint and kind of done like stripes down its bark. Can you see down the bark? Yeah. And they have leaves. You can also tell they're hornbeam because they've got little serrations on the leaves, so they're not smooth around the edges, but they've got little serrations like a little sharp knife. And they're one of the hardest trees in the world, so back in the day used to use them for water wheels, for the pots and stuff, and even in some of the first watches they used them because it's so hard before we started using metals. They used to use this hornbeam wood for stuff like that, and you'll see lots of them, some of them very ancient and some much younger like this further on, but they're I love just seeing their leaves come out in spring and kind of just hope again after not having anything on them for 3 or 4 months, just to see the leaves come out. And Connaught water. All of the lakes in the forest are man-made for various different reasons, mostly coming out of the gravel. There's only a sandbank or the gravel bank, so digging the sand and the gravel out, mostly sadly to help make the roads that people then drive through the forest on, which is a bit of a mixed blessing. But they does need lovely places like this where you've got birds and water them and make people feel very different. Yeah, if you can come off the path a bit, I've other people get through. I don't know, that's a good question. I will look that up and we'll find out for the next group we bring round. I don't know what it's called.
I'll email the answer.
Okay, yeah.
Peter,
sorry, Neil.
It was originally called Fairmead Lake, but then the first ranger of Epping Forest was Lord Connaught, and it was named after Lord Connaught. So it was dug out in 1893. Between 1883 and 1893, then they created the island over there, and it was to drain the area around it so they could farm it more effectively. So this area in the winters gets very boggy, but the lake is then designed to drain that land from the streams coming up from High Beach. So it's after Lord Connaught, who was the first ranger of the Epping Forest in Epping Forest.
So teamwork for information.
No, let's swap.
What's a ranger?
Look like this or this, and they've been cut kind of above head height, and they were cut on a 12 or 15-year cycle so that people could use the wood for firewood. So it's basically cut up to a bit the size of your forearm to use as firewood, and that's why these have been cut for hundreds and hundreds of years in this way. So this is probably it's another hornbeam. 400 or 500 years old, and because people have been working with the trees, like symbiotically with them, cutting them every 12 or 15 years, they're still here. We can still hug them. They've still got leaves coming out. They're still doing fantastic things to the environment. They're great for bugs and insects and stuff as well, because they're so old. Because people here decided they weren't going to cut them down, they were going to cut them at head height, let them grow up, and actually it produces more branches. So it produces more branches for the people who needed it for their firewood. But the trees still live and support their children, their children's children, their children's children's children. You know, several hundreds of years later. So they're all really wonderful like that. So this is the hornbeam, and Neil, my glamorous model over there, looks exactly the same, but this is a beech tree. So beech trees, uncut, look like this one here. So this is a maiden, hasn't been cut, and that has been cut a beech tree at head height again.
But Neil, so how climb it? Neil, so how old is that tree then? That one there?
So beech grows more quickly than the hornbeam, so that might be 250, 300 years old probably.
And how deep is it?
So the roots on beeches are really shallow. We'll probably see some, sadly, because of the recent winds. Quite a few have come over. There was one just on the path back there. So it's quite a shallow root and it's quite a wide root ball. But the winds coming at different times of year now, they're getting more damage because in the autumn they were still in leaf and the big winter winds came through early. They still had leaf, so it's like having a sail up, so there's more resistance. Whereas they should be, you know, the winds are in winter and you've got no leaves on the tree, so the wind just goes straight through the branches.
What's the height of these?
So Neil, you're a geographer.
30, 40 metres.
But just check out the trees.
So I guess this is what he. So I guess this is what he's been talking about how the trees, certain trees, that the roots are so shallow that when the wind blows, it can topple them over. But still, amazing though with nature.
Walking north, over there you can see there's the land gets higher. That's the highest part of the forest, and on top of that is Loughton Camp, which is an Iron Age encampment. There are a series of ring ditches up there. So the thought was that it was actually for defensive purposes. There would have been a palisade, a wooden palisade going around the top, and a series of ditches, and they would have taken the cattle.
Defensive from who are they defending from?
The other tribe.
The other tribe.
Oh, it's very dangerous around here.
Even now,
You got your Essex boys.
A bit of a bust up, you know? Essex, isn't it? So we're looking at 2,500 years ago, so 500 BCE. So that was Loughton Camp. There's another one to the north, Amesbury Banks as well, which had a similar purpose as well. So they would have taken the cattle in. When they did the excavations initially, they didn't find very much pottery. So they think it wasn't necessarily domestic, it was more sort of safety. But all the trees wouldn't have been here then. So it would have been a very, very obvious thing.
Of course,
So remember, trees have been cut down in prehistory in terms of farming and activities and things like that. The other thing we've also got round here, which is a bit of like folklore, as you go in, there's a small little valley called Kate's Cellar, where they think Dick Turpin, the famous highwayman, hid out with his gang. There's also another area a bit further over also where he was meant to have gone in as well, Turpin's Cave, where he was actually, he was in this particular area. Because obviously there was a road going through the forest, which we're not on, but we'll see where it was at that particular time, and so this was an area where they could actually hide out.
Stand and deliver.
Stand and deliver.
So this is the hunting lodge where the warriors would basically use a bow and arrow to hunt deer. So it wouldn't have a roof at that time. And what it'll do is that you'll have the workers basically herd deer up here. And as they herd the deer up here and they have them ready or pinned in, then the warriors will be up there with the bows and arrows and they will shoot the deer and said that they were hunting. Right, Epping Forest. Just nice to get away from London. You know, all that noise, pollution, all that kind of crap, and just nice to be in nature with people like yourself, who's going through a lot of crap, you know, everyday stress. But yeah, it's just nice to be in nature and just to have discussions around what our boundaries are. You know, how do we respect each other, partnership, relationships, and you know, it's nice to do it in nature where you don't feel all that pressure and you can release all that aggression, you know, without judgment. But yeah, I think a lot of us forget that around London, you can just jump on a train and it's a short ride to get to these nice green areas. We have a lot of history. And what's stopping us, you know? What's stopping us from actually taking a day out, even with family, you know, to connect? And nature seems to be a very natural kind of connection to the soul, something that you can enjoy with your loved ones.
How about yourself?
True. All by yourself. And that's so honestly, just to have time to yourself and reflect, you know, reset. Because I know a lot of us feel a lot of crap, you know, everyday life in London. And you gotta face it, London life is like, what, crabs in a bucket?
You know.
Rat race?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And funny enough, you know, being here now, you're allowed to appreciate silence because you don't realize the noise around you until you come to a place like this, you know what I mean? I'm not hearing no cars, no ambulance, no police sirens or whatever. In fact, even the planes that are flying there, they're so high up you can't even hear them. You can see them, but you can't hear them.
What I experience is, in places like this, when you live in London, you bring your own company. When you're in London, certain people you have to mix with due to work, family, whatever. But when you come to a place like this, you can bring your own family, even just to come by yourself.
Well, basically breaking the norm, ain't it? You're breaking the norm, or the routine. You go to work, you have to, people, whether you like them or don't like them, you have to interact here, so you can either mosey around by yourself or branch off with somebody you're having a conversation with. Yeah.
But what I'm trying to get is that there's a big difference when you have to do something and when you want to do something.
This is a choice.
This is a choice, yeah.
That's the other aspect about it.
And it's always more pleasant that way.
And the thing is, you know, when I say it's a choice, let me put that in here. So here, I didn't come with a family member, so I'm not thinking about your kids, your grandchildren, or whatever. I can get into myself, whatever. If I want to think about them, I can think about them without getting a reaction, which what normally would get.
Project